My name is Ava Mitchell, and I learned the hard way that betrayal doesn't always knock on the front door. Sometimes, it wears your last name and sits across from you at Thanksgiving. It was a calm Wednesday morning in Seattle, the kind where the sky looked washed with silver. I was at my job at BrightPath Financial Analytics, finishing a quarterly report, when my phone buzzed with a notification from my property management app. Your condo has been sold. Final documents available. For a second, I thought it was a glitch.
Sold?
By who?
How?
The only place I owned was my small one-bedroom condo on Harborview Crescent, the first thing I bought after years of saving, budgeting, and working late nights. It was the one space in the world that felt truly mine. My hands trembled as I opened the email. Congratulations on the successful sale of your condo. I froze. I hadn't listed it. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't authorized anyone. Attached at the bottom was a PDF of the signed transfer. The signature said Ava Mitchell. But the handwriting, I knew that handwriting. It was my mother's. A cold wave ran down my spine. I called the real estate agent immediately. She answered cheerfully.
Oh.
The couple said you were out of town and asked us to handle everything. They already had all the paperwork signed.
Couple. Signed.
Out of town. There was only one couple who had access to my documents. My parents, Daniel and Laura Mitchell. I didn't even finish my workday. I drove straight to their house in Bellevue, heart pounding. Mom was arranging flowers. Dad was reading the paper. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I asked one question. Why did you sell my condo? Dad didn't flinch. Mom didn't blink. Dad said calmly, Ava, you weren't using it. We needed the money. In that quiet living room in Bellevue, something inside me broke. Softly, silently, permanently. I stood there in my parents' living room in Bellevue, staring at the two people who had just stolen the biggest thing I had ever earned. My condo wasn't luxury, but it was mine, my safety, my independence, my pride. Mom placed her flowers into a vase like we were discussing grocery lists. Ava, sweetie, you barely lived there. It was wasting away. I swallowed hard. It was mine. Dad finally put his newspaper down. And now the money helped us cover debts. We didn't have a choice. I felt heat rise in my chest. You had a choice. You could have asked me. Mom let out a soft laugh. Oh, come on. You're dramatic. You should be thanking us. At least now you're not tied to that tiny place. Tiny? I had worked 3 jobs to buy that tiny place. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. How much did you sell it for? Dad shrugged. 200,000. Not bad for something you weren't using. 200,000. Below market value. Way below. It was worth 350, I whispered. Mom tilted her head. Yes, well, we needed a fast sale. My stomach twisted. Dad continued, You're young. You'll buy something else. We're older. We need stability. Family sacrifices, Ava. There it was. The Mitchell family mantra. Family sacrifices. Translation. Ava sacrifices. Everyone else benefits. Years of memories rushed back. Mom taking the college fund meant for me to help Emma with her wedding. Dad using my savings temporarily and never returning it. My parents calling me selfish whenever I put up boundaries. And I realized this wasn't a first-time mistake.
It was a pattern.
And I had enabled it. Mom walked past me, patting my shoulder as if comforting a child. You'll understand when you're older. I stared at the floor, fists clenched. Not this time. Not anymore. In that moment, a quiet decision formed inside me. Not loud, not impulsive, but sharp as glass. They took something from me. I was going to take something back. When I drove back to my apartment that evening, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I wasn't angry the way people expect rage to look. No yelling, no crying, no dramatic breakdown. It was quieter than that. A cold, focused kind of pain. I sat on my couch in my rented unit on Pinebrook Lane, staring at the wall for a long time. The condo on Harborview Crescent had been the proof that I could build a life without depending on anyone, especially my parents. And now it was gone. Stolen. I opened my laptop and logged into my financial accounts. Empty. They had taken everything from the condo sale and used it for their debts.
Every
Single.
dollar.
As the reality settled in, a memory resurfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16 when Mom told me, "Ava, everything in this family belongs to everyone. Learn to share." But somehow the rule never applied the other way around. My belongings?
Shared.
My savings?
Shared.
My opportunities?
Shared.
Theirs? Locked away. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like an ATM, I would treat them like adults who made their own choices. No more rescuing. No more guilt tripping. No more family sacrifices. I pulled up the property listing of their house in Bellevue, the same house they had been struggling to maintain for years. Mortgage overdue. Repairs pending. Taxes late every single cycle. They weren't stable. They were sinking. And now they had dragged me down with them. As I studied the listing history, I noticed something. The house was on a pre-foreclosure list. Filed quietly. Not even my sister Savannah knew. A slow, calm thought formed. If they could sell what's mine, I could buy what's theirs. Not out of cruelty. Not out of spite. But as proof that they couldn't control me anymore. The quietest revenge isn't loud. It's legal. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because for the first time in years, my mind felt clear. I made myself a cup of black coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop again. I went straight to the pre-foreclosure notice for my parents' Bellevue house. The numbers were worse than I thought. 3 months behind on mortgage. 2 years of unpaid property taxes. Roof damage they never fixed. And a home equity loan they never mentioned. They were drowning. And selling my condo had only bought them a few weeks. I clicked through the documents slowly, not out of curiosity, but out of something sharper.
Clarity.
They didn't steal from me because they were desperate. They stole because they assumed I wouldn't fight back. All my life, they had used my silence as permission. Not anymore. I called a real estate attorney in Seattle, Jordan Hayes, someone my company had worked with before. His voice was warm, professional. "Ava, what can I help you with?" "I want to buy a house," I said, but quietly. He chuckled. "Whose house?" I hesitated only a second. "My parents." The pause on the other end was long. "Are they selling?" "No," I said calmly. "They're losing it." Jordan exhaled. "Okay, here's what we can do. If it's in pre-foreclosure, you can purchase it directly from the bank once it hits auction. You'll need proof, timing, and funds ready." Funds. That word hung heavy. But I wasn't helpless. I had my 401k, savings, my emergency fund, and a quiet, burning determination to reclaim what they took. Jordan added, "You'll own the house legally. They won't be able to contest it." My pulse steadied. Good.
Perfect.
I thanked him, hung up, and leaned back in my chair as the sky outside turned pale blue. They had stolen my condo without asking. So I would buy their house without warning. Not out of revenge, but out of justice. Over the next week, I stayed completely silent. No calls to my parents.
No confrontation. No arguments.
Nothing. Silence was my shield, and they didn't even notice it. Mom texted me twice, both times casually. "We're repainting the living room. Send money if you can."
She didn't ask how I was.
She didn't mention the condo. She didn't acknowledge what they'd done. Dad sent a short message too. "What's the login for your Hulu?" It stopped working. That was it. That was the level of importance I held in their life. Wallet level. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on preparing for the auction. Every night after work, I sat at my desk on Pinebrook Lane, going through financial documents, checking loan options, reviewing buyer requirements, and speaking with attorney Jordan Hayes. Jordan emailed me the rundown. Auction date, 29 days. Status, pre-foreclosure. Bank, Evergreen Home Lending. Minimum bid, $410,000. The number made my stomach twist, but my resolve didn't budge. I started tightening my life, Cutting unnecessary expenses, canceling subscriptions, cooking at home, putting every extra dollar aside. It wasn't easy, but every sacrifice felt meaningful. Meanwhile, my parents behaved like nothing had happened. One day my younger sister Savannah called, voice full of annoyance. Mom says you're ignoring her. You should call. She's stressed about money. I asked softly, did she tell you what happened to my condo? Savannah paused. No, what happened? Of course. Mom hadn't told her. I didn't explain. I just said, I'm handling things my way. Savannah sighed. Dad says families should support each other. I looked out my balcony window at the Seattle skyline, glowing under the evening lights. Tell him, I said quietly. Support works both ways. After I hung up, something inside me settled. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. I needed justice. And justice was coming in 29 days. The next morning, I woke up with a new kind of energy. Not anger,
Not sadness.
but clarity. If I was going to buy their house legally, I needed proof of everything they had done. Not to expose them publicly, but to protect myself in case they tried to twist the story later. Because if my parents were good at one thing, it was rewriting history to make themselves the victims. So I started gathering every piece of information I could. I went back through emails, texts, call logs, bank statements. I pulled up the scanned documents from the condo sale. The forged signature that looked almost like mine. The notarization done by someone I didn't recognize. The rush sale agreement my parents pushed through. I printed everything and kept it in a file labeled simply, Mitchell case. Not because I planned to take them to court, but because I knew the moment they realized I had bought their house, they would blame me. They always did. Later that evening, I visited the Evergreen County Records office. The clerk, a woman named Karen, typed my parents' address into her system and let out a low whistle. Whoever owns this place is in trouble. I kept my expression neutral. What do you mean? Back taxes, liens, missed mortgage payments. Honestly, once this hits auction, it's done.
Done.
The word echoed. On my drive home, Seattle's streetlights blurred past me like streaks of gold. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't guilty either. They had taken from me without thinking twice. They had treated my hard-earned condo like extra furniture they could pawn off. So, why should I hesitate? When I got home, I placed the folder marked Mitchell case inside my locked cabinet. Then I transferred my savings into a separate high-yield account Jordan recommended for auction preparation. Step by step, day by day, my plan grew sharper. They had taken my home.
Soon I would own theirs.
And this time, it would all be legal, documented, and undeniable. 20 days before the auction, my parents invited me to dinner.
No apology. No explanation.
Just a text from Mom. Come over Sunday. We're grilling. Bring dessert. It felt less like an invitation and more like a command. I stared at the message for a long minute. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the calm, strategic part, knew I needed to see them before everything changed. So I went. Their Bellevue house looked worse than before.
Paint peeling.
Grass overgrown. The porch light flickering like it was too tired to stay alive. Inside, things were no different. Boxes everywhere. Bills stacked on the counter. A stress my parents pretended didn't exist. Dad greeted me with a quick nod. Mom forced a smile. Dinner was quiet at first. Savannah wasn't there, which I was grateful for. She didn't deserve to get caught in this storm. Halfway through dinner, Mom sighed dramatically. Ava, we're drowning. You know that, right? I kept my voice even. I know things are hard. Dad put down his fork. You could help more. There it was. The real reason they called me over. Mom leaned forward. You make good money. You live alone. You don't have kids. You can contribute.
Contribute.
To the house they were losing.
To the bills they created.
To the problems they hid. I asked softly, where did the money from my condo go? Both of them froze. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom's eyes narrowed. Dad finally said, we used it for the house. And groceries. And emergencies. Stop keeping track of things. It's unhealthy. I swallowed a bitter breath. Unhealthy? They stole my home. Mom added quietly. You'll understand when you're a parent. I looked at them. Two adults who took everything from me and still believed they deserved more. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply said, we'll talk soon. Because soon, they'd learn the real meaning of contribution. The next few days moved strangely slowly. Work at Bright Path Financial felt normal on the surface. Meetings, reports, deadlines. But underneath it all, my mind counted down the days like clock ticks. 16 days until auction. Every night, I reviewed documents with attorney Jordan Hayes. He sent me updates on the foreclosure timeline, the bank notifications, the minimum bid. Everything was falling into place. But my parents had no idea. One evening, I stopped by a small cafe in downtown Seattle to clear my head. I sat near the window, sipping a hot chai latte, watching the rain streak down the glass. That's when I got a text from my sister Savannah. Mom says you're being cold lately. Did something happen? I closed my eyes for a moment. Did something happen?
Yes.
Something huge. Something painful. Something she still didn't know. But Savannah had always been the neutral one, the only person in our family who treated me fairly. I didn't want to drag her into this. So I typed carefully.
Ivy fine.
Just busy. Love you. She sent back a heart. And that tiny message reminded me why I had to be smart,
Not loud.
not emotional, not rushed. This wasn't revenge against my family.
It was a boundary.
A final, unbreakable boundary. Later that night, I quietly drove past my parents' house again. No one knew I was coming. The living room lights were off. Only the kitchen glowed faintly. Through the window, I saw Mom sitting at the table with bills spread everywhere. Her hands in her hair, her face tired and worried. For a moment, guilt tried to rise inside me. But then I remembered. She wasn't helpless.
She chose this.
She made decisions that hurt me repeatedly, without hesitation. And now the consequences were knocking. As I sat in my car in the dark Bellevue Street, I whispered to myself, this isn't punishment. This is responsibility. Because if they could take something they didn't earn, I could reclaim something they didn't deserve. 10 days before the auction, things took a turn. I was leaving my office when my phone rang.
Mom.
For a moment, I considered letting it ring. But something told me to pick up. Hello. Her voice came out sharp, uneasy. Ava, have you been ignoring us? I kept my tone calm. I've been busy. She scoffed softly. You're always busy when we need you.
Need.
That word again. As if my existence revolved around fixing their choices. She continued. We got a notice today. Something about the house. Did you get anything? My heartbeat steadied. So they finally knew.
Elite gently. No.
What happened? Mom exhaled shakily. They're saying we're behind, that the bank might. Ava, this can't be happening. I listened silently while she unraveled. Dad took the phone then, his voice gruff. We need money. Immediately. Transfer whatever you can tonight. This isn't a request. There it was. The command. The entitlement. The assumption that I would always give, always bend, always save them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break. I simply said, I can't help this time. Silence. A stunned, heavy silence. Dad snapped. What do you mean you can't? You're our daughter. I felt something settle inside me. A line finally drawn. I'm your daughter, I said softly. Not your insurance policy. He cursed under his breath and hung up. I stood outside the office building, the evening wind cold against my face. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. Across the street, people rushed home. Coffee cups in hand, coats pulled tight, unaware of the quiet war unfolding in one corner of Seattle. I looked up at the darkening sky and felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Power.
Not the loud, controlling kind, but the calm strength that comes from finally choosing yourself. 10 days. In 10 days, everything would change. Auction day. A cold Friday morning in Seattle. The air felt sharp, like the world itself was holding its breath. I arrived early at the Evergreen County Auction Hall, dressed simply, black coat, hair tied back, documents in a neat folder. Attorney Jordan Hayes met me by the entrance. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded once. "I'm ready." Inside, the room buzzed with quiet conversations. People flipping through property lists, talking about investments and rentals. But for me, this wasn't an investment. It was justice. When the auctioneer stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent. Next property, 2249, Bellevue Crest Drive. My parents' address. Hearing it spoken aloud made my heart tighten, but not with guilt. With clarity. The auctioneer continued, "Minimum bid, $410,000. Do we have an opening?" Jordan gave me a small nod. I raised my paddle. 410. A man in the back countered. 420. Jordan leaned close. "He's probably an investor. Go higher." I lifted my paddle again. 450. The man hesitated, then countered weakly. 460. Jordan whispered, "He's reaching his limit. One strong jump will end it." I inhaled slowly. Then, 500,000. The room stirred. The investor lowered his gaze. No one else bid. "Sold," the auctioneer announced. To bidder 49. My bidder number. For a moment, everything was quiet. Jordan looked at me with a small smile. "You did it." I nodded, exhaling softly. Not triumph. Not excitement. Just peace. Outside, the Seattle air felt colder, sharper, lighter. I stood in the parking lot while Jordan finalized the sale behind me. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Ava, the bank called. They're saying something about the house." "What's going on?" Another message from Dad followed. "Call us now." I stared at the screen. They didn't know.
Not yet, but they were about to.
In the quiet morning light, I whispered to myself. They took my home. Now I own theirs. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't revenge. This was the truth finally landing where it belonged. I drove to my parents' house in Bellevue that evening. Not out of anger. Not out of victory. But because unfinished stories deserve an ending. The porch light flickered as I walked up the steps. A reminder of the repairs they never made. I knocked once. Mom opened the door, her face pale, eyes wide with worry. "Ava, thank God. The bank is saying horrible things. They're talking about ownership, about some auction." Dad appeared behind her, flushed, agitated. "Did you know about this? Why didn't you warn us?" For the first time in my life, their panic didn't control me. I stepped inside calmly. "I didn't warn you," I said quietly, "because you didn't warn me when you sold my condo." Mom froze. Dad blinked rapidly. Silence filled the room like thick smoke. I placed a folder on the table. The same folder labeled Mitchell, case. Inside were copies of the forged signature, the sale agreement, the financial transfers, everything. Mom whispered, "Ava, we were desperate." I nodded gently. "I know. And I was your solution." Dad swallowed hard. "So, you let the bank take our house?" "No," I said. "I bought it." The words fell like glass. Mom covered her mouth. Dad's face drained of color. "You bought it," he whispered.
Yes.
"Legally. At auction this morning." Mom stumbled into a chair. "You're kicking us out?" Her voice trembled with practiced innocence. I shook my head.
No.
"I'm giving you time. 60 days. After that, we set boundaries, written ones. No more taking my money. No more using my name. No more decisions without consent." Dad stared at me, speechless. Mom began to cry softly, but I felt nothing cruel. Just peace. I stood up, walked to the door, and turned back once. "You taught me that family shares everything. But today I learned something new." They looked up, broken and quiet. "Family doesn't take what isn't theirs." I walked out into the cold Seattle night, my breath steady, my steps light. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's backup plan. I was free.